o pi'i mauna ko uwai, no laila ko inoa o Kapono I keia manawa. So I'm from Hilo. My name's Cliff, and my family originally came to Kohala on the second migration, one of the 7 canoes. And that family's name was Pi'i Mauna, which means to climb the mountain. And through the years, we've went through many names, and now Kapono is now my family name. So we come from Hilo, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about some science things. I grew up in Hilo. I was born on Oahu. I grew up in Hilo, and I went to school on Oahu and in San Diego, California. And I just moved home in August 2018. What I studied when I was away at school was chemistry, analytical chemistry, which basically is just looking at the molecules in the world and seeing how they affect our lives. So some people use analytical chemistry to create plastic. Some people use analytical chemistry to create new drugs. Some people look in agriculture. Some people use it to make soda. So it's basically just trying to use molecules to understand how we interact with our world. And for me, I believe that really a truly universal language is through the chemistry. It is through the molecules. And I kind of have a theory. I don't know if it can be proved right now, but I feel like the kupuna understood that there's a molecular connection to everything that we're doing. And modern science now, conventional science, is trying to interpret that relationship on a molecular level. Kind of something that I've been trying to just ask and see if people really understand is this idea of what does it mean to be organic and what does it mean to be natural. And does anyone really have any mana'o about what is something that's organic? When we think organic, what do we think? Okay, from a scientific perspective, yes. Carbon and hydrogen. Maybe from a more broader perspective, I think organic means farmed fresh, maybe it's no pesticides, it's from the earth, you naturally, and not unadulterated, maybe, so that's a pretty interesting thing to think about from a chemistry point of view. Organic means it has carbon inside of it. So really anything with carbon from a chemist point of view would be organic. And that's interesting to think about because even this water bottle, we think, what is this made out of? Plastic, right? But does anyone know the molecular composition of plastic? It's carbon. It's carbon and hydrogen strictly. There's no other elements in a plastic water bottle other than carbon and hydrogen. Color comes in with different types of dyes or smaller molecules, but they're really small amounts that make the color. So we begin to now get confused on what is organic and what is not if anything with carbon becomes organic. And this idea of where the carbon comes from and where it ends up, I think, is a broader perspective to try to understand. Whereas the difference between this blade of grass here or this piece of stick, this is made out of carbon too, right? And so is this. The difference between the two is the carbon originated in its synthesis on the top of the earth, and this came from the center of the earth. Because the natural carbon cycle is that as this stick breaks down and over millions of years it gets compressed, and the carbon then turns into a very stable molecular structure known as oil. And that oil now can be used to create other things. Whereas other ways that carbon makes new things is the carbon in the atmosphere can be uptaken by a plant and it creates sugar, which then builds the plant up, which other animals can consume, which other animals consume, and then that cycle stays kind of on the surface. And maybe that's what we start to think what is organic, right? We start to think maybe the carbon that stays on the surface of the earth is natural. What becomes different is when we see all that carbon go to the center and we're extracting that carbon in the form of petroleum oil, and then we begin to synthesize products. And I'm not sure if we're all aware of how much things are based from petroleum. From our clothes to our sunglasses, our shoes, literally everything has carbon from the center in the earth created into it. And a lot of it is in this form of we call polymers. So what a polymer is basically molecules that are extended into these long chains. And that is pretty much everything. We have natural polymers that create like bark and DNA, protein. Those are all natural polymers. And then we have synthetic ones like the water bottle. So this is kind of something that I think about a lot, is how do I impact my environment through this carbon cycle? And where does my waste go? You know, because a lot of it is carbon emission and then carbon sequestering, how much carbon gets taken in. And looking at it from a chemistry point of view, it simplifies it enough to kind of wrap your head around how we're interacting with the natural world. So on the mountain, it really becomes like a microcosm of what's happening on an island. You know, we say that the island is a microcosm for the rest of the world, but truly we can begin to see that every bite of food that we take up here, it's got to go somewhere, either through human waste or municipal waste. Input equals output. And we kind of forget because of, you know, the situation at hand, but that doesn't escape the fact that we are leaving a footprint on this mauna in some way, shape, or form just by breathing, just by living, because we are pulling carbon from the atmosphere, or we're releasing carbon and we're pulling carbon through whatever else, respiration, things like that. But mostly we are taking food and then we're releasing it, whether through it's like gas, or whether through it's human waste, or whether it's through the products which we have. And that's, I think, something to really consider, is how do we exist not in isolation from our environment, but understanding that relationship, even on a chemical level. And that's something that I am wondering if you guys can see, where are some of the main forms of waste on the Mauna right now? If you guys had to water, but
No, this plastic water bottle I see more in the containers around now.
yeah, and the water is you know, the water bottle is just representing hydration. Like, we need to stay hydrated, right? So that's, I think, if we can think about in that way. What are some other forms of waste that we have to think about on the mountain? Human waste. And where is the input from that? Food, right? Food on the mountain. Okay. What are some other forms of waste? Gas, right? Gas emissions. So, you know, as we start to give examples, what is your guys' definition of waste? If you guys had to define what waste is, what would that be?
Something that can't be recycled. Like, it's at its end point, and then nothing else useful can be taken from it.
Okay.
Which the porta potties, like when we were at Standing Rock, we had to get rid of the porta potties because they were going to freeze. And so there was a way to compost waste that we can't use in a more sustainable way. And so it took a little more effort.
Sure.
Now it's replaced because it's in the porta potty, but it could be used.
So, do we all agree that waste can be defined as something that's no longer valuable to us? Right? So if it no longer is valuable to us, does that negate the fact that it might not be valuable to anyone else? Our waste can be nutrients or something else. If you put plenty CO2 to a human, it's very toxic. But if you put a lot of CO2 to a plant, it thrives. So really this idea of something no longer being of value to one organism or one system doesn't mean it's not valuable somewhere else. So waste is always thought about in that way in my mind. So again, let's think about more about what are forms of waste on the mountain. We have plastic water bottles, we said human waste. What else would? Food, okay. Cups, and we like to call those forms of waste municipal waste. So for municipal waste, the World Bank organization estimates that on average humans generate about 4.6 pounds of human waste, of municipal waste daily. So, I mean, we can stretch it, we'll round up 5 pounds a person per day, municipal waste. And this is just stickers and straws and paper and things like that. And because it's on average, you might throw away a cooler one day and it kind of pumps it up, and maybe you don't put any waste out another day. So that's just kind of on average. And why that statistic is kind of ingrained in my mind is when I asked how many people are coming up to the mountain, and I was told anywhere between 300 to 500 people during the week, up to 5,000 people during the weekend. So if we take that number, we have up to potentially 25,000 pounds of municipal waste per day. So that's 50,000 pounds over a weekend of waste. And that's just doing an average. That's not even talking about, and that's everyday life. That's not talking about people who have to live up here. That's not talking about people who depend on single use just to survive in these conditions. So that's a concern. On top of that, we have the human waste. I don't know the statistic of how much human waste per day is the average, but we do have to know that can't go into the ground. So when we look at the sources of these wastes, we definitely know where does a lot of the municipal waste come from, like the source. If we think about the infrastructure that's set up here on the Mauna, where is maybe the source of these wastes? Yeah, maybe closer. I mean, just like in terms of proximity on the Mauna. The kitchen, right? And there's another place too. It's the Kanaka Costco. I don't know if you guys visited the Kanaka Costco yet, but that's where people give donations, and you can get a t-shirt, or you can get a paper towel or something like that. So if we see those, that's what we call the point sources of our waste. And then they go into us, the consumer, and then they turn into waste on the out. And that's the stream. So if we think about that, Po'o side of the stream, we have Kanaka Costco, which feeds into the kitchen, which we are now along the way consumers, which we put back in ho'i into the stream. And now the output is the big, I don't know if you guys even seen the big, right behind the ahu is you see the dumpsters that are kind of overflowing now with rubbish. And we rely on volunteers to now remove that opala off the Mauna. So that's the flow. What are some ways that we could cause what we call a looping system, where it's not upstream, downstream, but how do we kind of generate and really get into that idea? Because if we think about sustainability, what does it mean to sustain something? Keep it the same. So actually we kind of are being sustainable if we just keep that stream flow to that Opala center and it goes down. But if we huli that sustain and we make it into something that's circular, how do we now make that sustainable? Like, what are we making sustainable? How can we maybe close this loop on the Mauna? Okay, so what would be a broader description of that? Just bring, what does that represent?
Reusable rather than single use.
Reusable, okay, versus single use, right? So that, I think that's a very nice thing. And that, where does that really hit on the stream? A reusable. Maybe in that kitchen area, right? Where the food, okay, reusable utensils. We're not producing the municipal waste through eating. But still we have another source, right? The Kanaka Costco, the donations. How do we adjust that? We can shut it down, you know, that's one. But we also maybe can think about limiting the demand or implementing some type of regulation that only asks us a certain type of product from there. Something that we know we can loop, right? So now we have two sources, the Kanaka Costco and the kitchen. And reusables is a big part of that. If we promote more reusable foods, or reusable containers and utensils, what now is going to happen? What's the consequence of?
We gotta wash it.
Then we got to wash it, right? So currently, does everyone know what we're doing on the mountain with the water?
The gray water is taken onto a container and then
Okay. So the water that we use on the mountain is stored and then it's removed off the mountain. But as we just said, by promoting more reusables, we're going to increase the amount of water, which we have to increase the infrastructure to get the water off the mountain. So there's always a trade-off. And where does that water come from? You know, bringing it in, you know. And are we bringing it in through big fill up from the tap, or are we bringing virgin plastic bottles? Mostly virgin plastic bottles. So these are all just parts of the infrastructure that we can begin to figure out to fully create this loop. Because if we do figure out how to promote reusables and we can handle the water being moved off the mauna, then that seems like a much more natural way than putting opala and taking it off the mountain. Because there's another way that we can sustain this, is if we get bigger bins, if we get more manpower, and we can remove all of those single-use municipal waste off the mountain. And we can sustain this type of behavior. Or if we shift, there's other things that we have to change even with our behavior as well. That comes down to the cook wanting to taste the food before we serve it. And that limits the convenience of just being able to dip, throw it away, you know. So that requires a little more effort on everyone's part, but these are the types of things that when we look at what does it mean to malama aina, aloha aina, we can see it in these costs and benefits. Any mana'o about any of that stuff? It shouldn't be though. I think it's more like I know it sounds like, oh, okay, we're doing a poor job, but we're actually doing, like, if you look at what's happening, the infrastructure that's created on the mauna is highly sophisticated. You know, this is traditionally not the place where we were supposed to be, right? This is Wauakua, a place where very, very few people could even be a part of. And now we have people who've been living here for almost a month already, you know, and we're thinking about waste. You know, if you look, it is very clean, you know. If we could have this type of behavior at festivals or at the beach, at the parks, like, it would be very clean, you know. And I think really this is more about allowing us to be critical on ourselves, allowing us to improve what we're doing and think about in terms, what are we truly sustaining? And if we pull back from Puʻuhuluhulu and we look at on an island, now things begin to maybe make a little broader sense. You know, now you're like, whoa, if I make 5 pounds of rubbish, how many people are in population in Hawaii? Over 1 million? Was it 1.2? So think about 5 pounds per day. You're talking about 5 million pounds of rubbish per day in Hawaii. And where is it? Exactly, where does it go?
Is it shipped off?
Well, it doesn't go straight onto it. There's, yes, there's landfills, there's H-Power, there's recycling centers, but at the end of the day, we're talking about 5 million pounds, you know, and that's just municipal waste. We're not even talking about things like electrical waste, you know, cords, microwaves, old TVs, VCRs, you know, these are all things to think about on a much bigger scale. Where if we say, oh, well, what if we try to promote reusables? Why not do plastic straws? You think, is the straw even going to do anything if I don't use a plastic straw? Think about how much, by one action with 1.2 million people, how that can take away the stress on the overall system. And I think that's what's nice about being up here and now being able to really see that those peels, they don't belong here. So they cannot exist here. Or we are doing something that we are saying is not pono through this entity that's coming in. You know, there's, if you read the environmental impact statement in the first page 15 to 30, it talks about the plans, the actual blueprints of the telescope. And one of the, it says on page 2-16 in the 5th paragraph that the telescope is going to have at the end a 5-acre footprint. And that's going to include the parking structure, the telescope itself, waste bins, storage for diesel, for generators in case electricity can't come up. And you think, wow, that's like so crazy. Like they're putting 5,000 gallons of diesel in the Aina. And we're producing 50,000 pounds of Opala right across the street. You know, like I think we just have to hold ourselves accountable to what we're fighting against and what we are perpetuating in our own daily life. And that can become the kapu aloha that really can make a difference. Because we have an opportunity now to not just prevent the development of a pristine area, but to show examples of how to properly manage these pristine areas. And every person can do that. Not every person can get arrested. Not every person can do the protocol. Not every person can go up the hill. But everyone can choose to be that example because the cameras are everywhere, you know? And you can really feel good knowing that in this small place, every person's role is a big role. It's one of the few places in the world that your little choice makes a big difference for something that is changing the world right now. You know, so it shouldn't discourage as much as almost empower you to know you can lead the planet just by choosing to not just say, oh, no straws or reusables, but understand that if we don't change what we're doing, it's the Opala bin, you know. So.
But you know what? They're gonna build. They see that they're a zero waste plant. What does that mean?
Yeah. So zero waste can actually mean a lot of things. I think when it comes down to is we need to ask, what does waste? Let's define waste. As we set up in this exercise, we said, what is waste? Waste means it's no longer valuable to them. So if they say they're zero waste, then they're gonna essentially not produce anything that they don't see value in. Doesn't mean they're not generating things, but they can use it to maybe make money somewhere else. They can use it, you know, and to be a truly zero waste, I don't know, Rosie, if you know, like, and Haunani or, you know, whoever kind of works in institutions on a day-to-day, it's very difficult to create an infrastructure of this magnitude with zero waste, truly zero waste.
So there's a federal definition of zero waste, and it actually has to do with electricity. It doesn't actually have anything to do with sewage or anything like that. So applying that definition, TMT would be a zero waste electrical building. It doesn't mean that it's not zero waste as far as
municipal or human.
human waste. So I think it's really important, to just check on what those definitions are.
Yeah.
It's like also, we talk about I'm on the City and County Climate Change Commission, and so we've been talking a lot about building codes and like development, and that's a zero waste. But yeah, it's really important to define what does zero waste mean, because it is actually a very specific definition.
Yeah. And that's the same even too, and if something is certified organic, just in the food, you can read a lot of times these definitions in the Federal Register, and it's kind of thick with legal terms. But if you read, this was back in 2009. I remember reading about what does it mean to be organic, and there was 16 certified pesticides that you can use as an organic farmer. So organic don't mean in the government's eyes you put it in the thing, whatever grow up, that's what you eat. That's not organic. Organic is okay, but you only can use from these people who have paid for the label to be able to get it. Cattle was one of them, where you can vaccinate a small cow up until 2 years old, then you remove it, then it's organic, grass-fed kind of beef. So like Rosie said, the definitions as you try to acquire more knowledge, just try to know at what parts where you want to define for yourself. And a lot of the information that I actually am reading is coming from TMT themselves. I read it off of their website, I read it off of all the paperwork, and it's helped me a lot. It's helped me tremendously in the way I think about understanding it.
Just thinking with my physicist head, like, there's no such thing as zero waste, because you have, by the second law of thermodynamics, you have to have some kind of waste. So what do they mean by zero waste for TMT electrically? That it's they didn't have to make solar panels, or what?
What they mean is that they're not going to be using like fossil fuels to generate the electricity.
Solar panels are toxic. They have lots of waste, but that's the government definition.
Yeah.
Said, so
And that's
that zero waste.
And that's one thing too, that if we look at this mountain, we have so this is my own manao. I don't expect any of you guys to push this, but for me, I feel both Hawaiian culture and science culture has been appropriated in this whole situation. And in the term of appropriation, they're only taking the parts they want and they're leaving the parts that they don't want. So Hawaiians and the sciences, that's happening. And I think that we need to really think about how do we understand the parts of the conversation that really matter. And from a Hawaiian perspective, or from whatever human perspective, this is a sacred place. But according to the US federal government, it is also sacred. It's a designated national natural monument. And the National Natural Monument Act was established in 1962 by the federal government of the United States of America. And in 1972, Mauna Kea was designated as this landmark. So I think it's important to realize that everyone in the room is saying that this is sacred. Foreign interests alongside local interests that have a direct connection to the summit are saying that it's not as sacred enough to protect it from development. And this is where I feel is misleading, because that's dangerous to use science as a weapon to develop pristine places that not only indigenous people have deemed sacred, but government agencies as well.
Does the Natural Registry grant it some sort of protection at all, or no?
Yeah, so and one of the parts that Haunani actually brought to my attention, that when the Supreme Court, that was a big argument, and the Supreme Court ruled in last October, that the existing telescopes have diminished the value enough that this new telescope will not further reduce the pristine environment. Which, if you read the environmental impact statement, you recognize that the sites A, B, C, they are up on the summit where the existing telescopes are. They have rules by the Mauna Kea management group to say buildings can't be a certain size. but they want it to be a lot bigger, so they're moving it to one of the undeveloped sites because it's outside of the regulatory zoning permits. So, and this is supplied by the TMT. It's under Get the Facts. So they're actually they're educating people. It's a good thing, you know. And I don't believe that the astronomers or even the business people are bad people. It just, I think they recognize that as a community, we might not be asking the right questions because they're giving us all the answers we want, you know, and that's to their advantage to be able to say, yeah, just read the 530-page environmental impact statement. If you don't know what's going on, how can you even know what page? This is page 216, 2-35. Like, I mean, I'm a nerd, so I read it, but like people don't really have time in their everyday lives to do that. So if you do have time, I think the TMT's website is a powerful resource because those documents have gone through all the permitting, they've gone to court, and if you don't agree with it, then you can say, I don't agree that on page 216, this code or this size of this is not gonna destroy pristine land. I don't believe that. And that's your right to do that, you know? And you can say, because this is an established federal protected area, I side with not just Hawaiians, but actually with the US government in saying that this is a sacred place. And I bring my reusable because I don't want to cause more waste on the mountain. So you can connect it in many ways. No, it's really about us being critical, like I said, of ourselves and not feeling guilty, but to know that, okay, not just say, okay, I'm not going to use this again, but say, how can we create an infrastructure to change it? So I was lucky to be able to be a part of a class this summer on Oahu, and my students created a scheme, a plan to reduce the waste by promoting reusable utensils on the mountain. And we're trying to get it all logistically set up, but these students that are taking a course, a science course for non-science majors, came up with a full plan, PowerPoint proposal to show the problem, which is up to 50,000 pounds over the weekend of municipal waste. How can we curb it? By reducing single-use plastic. And they created what they call the 3-pot system, where we create these bamboo lashed bins with water that we can hold onto, which would be our disposable water, and we wash our utensils and then we hang them in mesh bags. And those should be next to all the rubbish. So you get your recyclable tool or your reusable tool and you wash it, put your compost waste, and you can use it. And that becomes now the circle. You know? Is my time up? What time is it right now? Oh yeah, I think that's all that. Oh yes.
I would purchase my own reusable Aloha Aina kit
That's how.
here and then take it with me and use it for the lesson.
That'd be epic, you know, to push that. That's, you can kia'i by, you know, how do you kia'i? I kia'i by using my reusable water bottle. Many ways. Cool. Well, mahalo. Thank you, everybody. And then